This is the reading of The Park, a story about kids who snuck into an abandoned amusement park that ends up having a mind of its own. So here we go. This may be part one if I have to do it in several parts. The Park. David peeled the rusted chain-link fence up high enough for his two friends, Ron and Jeremy, to get under it. Each boy went under belly first, skateboards and inline skates in hand. David was the last one through. Bits of rust grabbed at his back of his shirt. Ron tried to hold the fence up while Jeremy pulled David the rest of the way in. They snuck past old arcade booths and deserted midway rides. The boys ran hunched over as if they were invading a foreign country. There was a certain amount of excitement while trespassing, not to mention the thrill that awaited them as they snuck their way in, just a short distance to their destination, the abandoned water slides. With great determination, they climbed up the artificial rocks to reach the point of one of the slides, the starting point. The slide gradually dropped 100 yards with all kinds of unexpected gyrations. David volunteered to walk his way down the slide first to remove the debris, broken limbs, lots of leaves, and even a few rocks. He inched his way down and around each bend as he yelled, "I'll holler at you when I get to the bottom." The boys nodded and were about to burst with anticipation and a touch of fear. Their eyes were big. "Be careful!" shouted Ron. "You're such a wimp," teased Jeremy, which called for a shove from Ron. They heard David's voice as he descended. "Ronnie?" Ronnie answered. He thought it was something important. "Yeah, I can hear you," David shouted. "You're such a wimp." He grinned as Ron replied, "Shut up, you poser." David just laughed. The boys had been waiting for this day for a long time. They found out what they could about this ghost town of sorts. In their research, they found that at one point it had all the major attractions and amusements, if not more, than some of the world's largest and well-known carnivals, fairgrounds, and major theme parks. The park was advertised as unlike anywhere else on Earth. And its biggest secret of all was supposed to be revealed the day they officially opened the park to the public. There were rumors about all the world's best automatronics, high-tech mechanical devices, and state-of-the-art robots that functioned like people. The big selling point wasn't just the enormous size of the park and its amazing rides and entertainment, but actually how the park functioned. There was a lot of anticipation and years of counting down until the opening day. Apparently, there was some controversy about it as well. Sadly, the park had been shut down and closed to the public before most people even got to step inside its gates. The boys could care less about all that. They just wanted to get in, explore, and skate the empty water slides. That was their mission. While David made his way down the one slide, the two boys above looked around nervously. Ron said, "I can't even read this sign." "That's 'cause you can't read," Jeremy mocked. Ronnie punched his friend in the arm and argued, "No, it's 'cause you brought your little sister's crappy flashlights." "Look," Jeremy said, "you can see for miles from way up here." "Yeah, just as long as no one sees us," confirmed his friend. Meanwhile, miles away, John Hanson, the owner and founder of Forever Happy Amusements, Inc., met with his lawyer, and 3 of the world's top and most prestigious mechanical engineer consultants. His lawyer, Mr. Goldberg, was addressing John's concern regarding how liable John would be if someone were to enter the park without permission and become seriously injured. In addition to the no trespassing signs, the gates, and the outer walls and fences, is it all secure? The lawyer asked John. John spoke with confidence and assertiveness. Oh, yes, of course. I have the signs up. I've had those up since before the park opened, and they remained up while the park was open and running and filled with people. The lawyer gave a snide look at John because of the statement, filled with people. John was well aware of his lawyer's nonverbal language and corrected himself. Well, we only opened one day, and that was just for friends and family members, and it was all really hush-hush. But we pre-tested everything. John's voice began to quiver with uncertainty. He was losing his confidence and decided to just answer the initial question. Yes, the signs and the gates and all that stuff, they're all still up. One of the engineers, Dr. Hatfield, who had his doctorate degree in civil engineering and mechanical innovations, spoke up with a very strong, strange accent. Yes, Mr. Hansen, is it? John nodded. Yes, Hansen. The doctor continued. Yes, normally I would be a man of many words and well-spoken vocabulary, but I find myself here today simply asking you, what is this crap all about? Why are we here? He gestured to the other men. John's forehead wrinkled. Mr. Wiggins, another consultant, affirmed the question. Yes, why do you need us? John bit his bottom lip, and his eyes pleaded for his lawyer to not only answer these fine gentlemen, but to make it sound as professional as possible. His lawyer read John's desperate cry and cleared his throat. Well, part of the reason you men have been chosen, or should I say hired, to be here today is for us to explain and simply tell you why you are needed here. That sounded redundant, thought John. The engineers thought the same thing, but they listened for the lawyer to get to the point and business at hand. See, Mr. Hansen here is an engineer as well. He created and built the Forever Happy amusement park. Part of his enterprise consisted of developing schematics from mathematical engineering resources like none other. The men began to look at each other, taking their eyes off of Mr. Goldberg, the lawyer. They exchanged looks of doubt, bewilderment, and simple disbelief. After all, the 3 of them were the cream of the crop, the absolute best top-notch brains of the world when it came to the most modern as well as controversial technology available. Mr. Wiggins asked, why haven't we heard of a thing about this park? Where is it located? Dr. Goldberg nodded at John, urging him to take over explaining things a little further. John swallowed hard. Well, it's kind of out in the boonies, as I like to say. There's a lot of land, but in a relatively small town called Northport, Florida. The population is low, comparatively speaking, but there's lots of undeveloped areas. Also, it's fairly close to the middle of the state, so people can travel from north or south to get to its semi-central location. It really is a good spot. As he spoke, his voice began to crack a little. Unknown to John, there was some cracking going on at his park, even as he spoke. Back at the park, "Come on down!" the boys heard David yell. "Oh, yes! Sick! You go first, Jeremy. That way you can wreck first," chuckled Ron. "Shut up, you poser. I will go first." Jeremy didn't have skates, and he wasn't about to ride his skateboard standing, not on the first run. So, he laid belly first on the board and yelled, "Rock and roll, guys!" as he gave himself a push, starting him down the long slope. He immediately yelled, but it was more out of fear and uncertainty than fun. Ron laughed out loud and yelled down to Dave, "I think you missed some sticks and stuff, Dave!" Dave smiled as he climbed as fast as he could to take his turn. Things were so quiet, the boys couldn't hear anything but Jeremy grunting as he tried to navigate his way through the rough terrain of the neglected slide. When Jeremy reached the bottom, they heard a thud. "Watch out! Remember, at the end is a 3-foot drop into an empty cement pool!" Dave's delayed reminder arrived too late to be useful. Ron busted out laughing. Jeremy stood to his feet, and he heard a high cranking. Then, a cracking noise, followed by what sounded like a loud yawn. He froze. He wondered if the others heard it. He thought for sure someone else had heard them and they were busted. Dave and Ron heard it too. They wondered if it was something to do with their friend Jeremy. David tried to be brave, then shouted, "Nice try, Jeremy!" "I don't think that was him, Dave." "Shh!" is all they heard back. Jeremy crouched down behind some bushes and hoped the other boys were hiding too. His thought was, maybe they will be caught, but not me. Ron and Dave ducked behind some artificial boulders. Ron said, "We're dead, dude." "Shut up! We're not caught yet. It's just an old tree branch or something." Dave searched for words. Ron hoped Dave was right and that Jeremy was all right. Then, what they heard next shook the boys to their very bones. Back in the office building, miles away, the park, like my lawyer said, is like none other. John began to speak with more confidence and show that he was very proud of the progress he achieved in modern engineering. He carried on, "The whole park, rides and all, run like your brain." As he spoke, back at the park, there was a deafening ba-boom! At first, the boys thought someone was shooting at them. It was the main generator kicking in, and it continued to increase in volume, starting with a low hum. Jeremy worked his way up the incline, grabbing a hold of fake bushes, artificial grass, and foam rocks. By the time he reached the top, the boys had come out from hiding. "I told you guys we'd get caught. Both of you were too loud, dude," Jeremy scoffed. Ron retaliated, "You were just as loud, Jeremy." David laughed. "Shut up, you bugs. Y'all are a bunch of puppies. It's just the generators to, turn on some of the old lights that go on just to keep things lit after dark." "Yeah, security lights, right, Dave?" Ron tried to assure himself. Dave shook his head. "Yep, that's old. That's all. Old, unused, unneeded security lights that no one ever even pays attention to anymore. There's no reason to patrol the park. There's nothing here to steal. There are signs up saying no trespassing, but so what? No one cares anymore. Relax, guys. Everybody knows that if someone has the guts to sneak in, like us, that whatever happens, happens. And the people sneaking in are at their own risk. The owner's got nothing to worry about because the public's been warned. I don't know, Dave, Jeremy's voice quivered. I know you don't know. That's why you're a scared idiot. David smiled big and looked at Ron. Are you a puppy too? Ron shook his head and began to speak, but maybe Dave interrupted. Look, I'm taking my turn. If there is someone here, some old fart rent-a-cop, he yelled, then let them catch me if they can. Ha ha! What are they gonna do? Torture me? Ron said, Hey, Jeremy, I got an old fart for you. Ha ha! With that being said, heard, and smelled, David climbed into the entrance tub of the dried-up water slide. He held the side rails and rolled forward and back on his rollerblades. Okay, hope you cleared the path even more than I did, Jeremy, he exclaimed as he shoved off, beginning his extreme daredevilish run down the dry, dirty flume. Ron and Jeremy looked at each other in disbelief and dismay, not sure that this was a very good idea, but they gained their confidence back when they heard Dave's voice exclaiming how much fun he was having. The way it works, gentlemen, Mr. Hanson continued to address the men at the board table, gaining confidence in what he brought from just a dream into reality. He was about to reveal his greatest achievement in life. It was also his biggest mistake. He took a deep breath and began. It is neurocharged. Just as our brains function every day of our lives, neurons match up with electrons and jump from one command to another. And when the neurons dock in the neurotransmitters, messages and commands are exchanged between our bodies and our brains. It's rather simple, really. Of course, in relation to the park, it is synthetic and simply mechanics. My colleagues and I spent endless planning sessions and asserted every effort to replicate the human body, brain, heart, and lungs. Fluids consisting of precise mixtures of oil, natural fossil fuels, and some helpful stimulating herbs, they provide the necessary fuel and flow. We have replicated how our blood moves and circulates, which in turn leads to and allows electric impulses to be shot off, telling our body, or in this case the machine, what to do, as well as how to act and react. Again, I am sure you will all understand it is elementary biology. I haven't created or invented anything. I just changed its form. Mr. Scalp, the third consultant, stood to his feet. You recreated the brain? We are mechanical engineers, not medical doctors. Who do you think you are? You think you're God? You created a body in the form of a whole amusement park? It was more of a statement than a question. John bowed his head and blushed from mixed feelings and emotions. He felt a certain amount of accomplishment, knowing none of them came up with the brilliant idea. However, he also had an overwhelming feeling of embarrassment as he answered, Well, no, now, I wouldn't say that. I just... Dr. Hatfield jumped in. You have fabricated and tampered with what the creator of human life has already done. There is a difference between humans and machines, Mr. Hansen. We all know this, and as engineers, we respect that and know that the two should never become one. When you mess with creation, that is when you become or go from being a scientist to becoming a mad scientist. The results are not only, how you say, unpredictable, but could be, and most likely are, horribly unimaginable. John's lawyer rushed to his defense. Now, wait a minute. My client has the best intentions and hasn't done anything unlawful. He has not done anything that hasn't already been done in the natural forces around us, as well as in us. John nodded and added, I put together a machine that runs on the same principles that are in us. The results, or the resources, were there to stimulate the way our bodies and minds work so that we just... Mr. Wiggins took his turn at bat and said two words that every one of them was thinking. You cloned it. John now became upset. He stood to his feet, leaned forward, and shouted back, If that is what you want to call it, then yes. Yes, I knew that the way we were created could be cloned, harnessed, and used for the improvement of our lives. I knew that we could mimic it with machines. The world has been crying out, yearning and lusting with an unquenchable desire to have robots that can relate and mimic human behavior. Mr. Scalp spoke again. But you have mocked the Creator, thinking you could possibly do better. You took on the job of creating an entire theme park, not just a single android. Yes, you can follow the blueprint of human life for the building and running of a machine, but should you? Mr. Wiggins said, He already has. Dr. Hatfield threw his hands up in the air and just scoffed. Mr. Hansen, I ask you again, why have you gathered us today? John's lawyer stepped up to the plate and spoke as softly and warmly as possible. It was a little strange to hear such a calming tone coming from a defense lawyer. Gentlemen, you are the only ones who can help us figure out how to shut the park down. All three men said the same words at the same time in unison. Shut it down? John tried to answer while still sounding rational. Well, it sleeps sometimes. Dr. Hatfield just responded, Oh, dear Lord. Mr. Wiggins let out a nervous gut giggle. For his own assurance that he actually heard things correctly, he asked, It sleeps? You mean it literally sleeps? Yes, that's affirmative. Not just a sleep mode. It shuts down to rest, and it stores up its energy to, well, wake when it's ready to start its next day or night, whatever the case may be. Mr. Wiggins said with sarcasm, Psst! Does it dream and sleepwalk too? Much to their surprise, Mr. Hansen replied with sincerity, Yes, it does. John wasn't sure if they didn't believe him or if they did believe him, but didn't want to face the facts. Mr. Goldberg advised John, let it all out. Explain the ramifications and why they can truly help us. Why we desperately need them. Mr. Hanson again took a deep breath to finally confess his mistakes. Well, when it sleeps, it shuts down. And then when it wakes, when it feels like it runs on a supernova charge, and the amusements become a nuisance. We have no way of controlling her. The speeds she exudes are extremely dangerous. Too fast or too slow. John shook his head in despair and stopped talking. Dr. Hatfield said, Zoo is actually a bipolar park. The others laughed, much to John and Mr. Goldberg's dismay. Mr. Scalp added, and it is a she. Mr. Wiggins joined in. Does she get PMS? Ha ha! He nudged his associates, and they all roared in laughter. It is not a laughing matter, gentlemen, insisted Mr. Goldberg. Yes, the rides literally have a mind of their own. She presents a similar psychosis of someone who is manic depressive, and her expressions, her emotions are acted out in the function of the various venues, variables, and rides in the park. The men's laughter stopped as John explained. The depression is just as bad as the mania. When it gets too high and all the mania reaches its peak, the whole park then drops its speed to horrifying slow speeds, causing roller coasters to be stuck upside down, not able to complete their course. The high-speed swings stop too suddenly, and the lawyer was losing his cool and began to breathe rapidly. His heart raced. She feeds off the excitement of those in the park, and, well, she is very moody. John's chest began to tighten. It was as if someone had removed the oxygen from the room as he thought about the giant swing ride they call Susie Swings. The engineers showed no mercy. This time, they were even more sarcastic. Mr. Skelp belted out, So, your park has mood swings. Ha ha, that's rich. John asked them to please collect themselves and give him a few more moments of their time and attention. He knew they were stuck between unbelief and wondering if it was some type of publicity stunt. Dr. Hatfield and Mr. Wiggins both thought that perhaps John and his lawyer were just trying to get the three of them to help build a better park. John then made his objective clear. Honestly, all expenses paid. We will take you to the park so you can see for yourself. You may think this is a holiday or a walk in the park vacation, but I will let you experience the severity of our need for your intervention. The men were intrigued and gave him their attention, so he dove in deep with his persuasion and explanation of what has been happening since the park was brought to life. The generators kick on. Just like when we wake up, things start running throughout the whole park. For instance, John pointed to a large mural on the wall. It was actually a map of the park. Mr. Scalp asked, Is that Susie? John confirmed. Well, it is her outsides. I have the internal schematics elsewhere. Diagrams of her internal organs, veins, and arteries that function these outer extremities. With the pointer, he began to specifically and intensely brief them of what they were facing. For example, the water slides. Back at the park, David was yelling, and he yelled with the thrill of arching up each bank of the slides, dodging some of the small pieces of nature that tripped up Jeremy. He used his legs as a natural shock absorber as he took each dip and drop. David was an avid inline skater. He knew he could be good enough for major competitions. He also felt like this was the best atmosphere and setup to push his inline skating skills to their greatest heights. What he didn't know was that as he swooshed down the dried up water slide, the pumps shot off 2,000 pounds of water pressure at the top of the flume. Ron and Jeremy jumped back when the water kicked on. There wasn't much of a warning, just a slight rumbling sound, and the water pressure started to flush through. Waves twisted and turned down the banks that seconds later Dave was conquering. He was just about to complete the pipe. He knew he had to make a jump at the end in order to land on his feet in the dried up water collection/wading pool that dropped down about 3 feet. As Dave ripped around the last hairpin swerve, he saw the end and heard something rushing in behind him. He had no idea what the roar was. He made his leap into the air as planned. The full force surge of water coming from behind was so powerful it propelled him through the air like a bullet from a gun. The water gathered in the reservoir, but Dave ended up slamming into a tree across from the pool. The boys at the top took different routes down the slope to try to warn their friend. Jeremy found himself sliding more than running. Ron hit a patch of freshly made mud which caused him to collide with the side of the slide. He got to his feet as fast as he could and tried to navigate the fastest way down. By the time they reached the bottom, the pool was almost all the way full. Ron jumped into the water, diving down to try to find his friend. On one occasion, when he surfaced in frustration, he heard Jeremy yelling his name, "Ronnie! Ronnie!" He looked in the direction Jeremy was pointing. They both saw David's body lying at the base of a massive tree. They ran over to the body, and the most unpredictable and oddest thing took place next. The 3 consultants leaned forward in their chairs as John Hanson gloated. Sometimes the waterworks kicks in first, almost like us having the urge to pee when we first wake up. Other times the music starts at first, seconds before any of the rides move and begin. That, of course, sets the festive good mood, and that is in any good amusement park. The doctor scoffed. Festive, amusement, good mood, for who? The lawyer present said, "Tell them more, please, John. They need to know." Mr. Wiggins argued, "What more do we need to know?" Mr. Scalp's only words were, "My goodness, let's go now." The other two turned in shock. "Go?" said Mr. Wiggins. Mr. Scout persisted. "Yes, now. What if someone were to get in there, or be in there, when she's waking up, coming alive and starting to work, fully functioning?" John tried to calm them down. "Well, gentlemen, I have signs." "Signs? Signs won't stop curious kids," Mr. Scout alarmed. John tried again. "And the walls and gates. It would be difficult even for an adult to gain entry." The doctor followed up with, "Where there is a will, there is a way. He is right. We need to go now and put this park, this witch, to sleep for good." Mr. Goldberg said, "We have transportation waiting." And with that, the men were off. While en route, Mr. Hanson felt it necessary to fill in the dead air of dismay with more information that would most likely help them deal with what he never thought would have to be completely destroyed. This was his entire life's work. It was a huge financial investment, not to mention all the personal time and sacrifice he made in order to bring this park to life. While in the park, the boys jumped back from David's body as he sprang to his feet and yelled, "That was awesome!" His friends were shocked that he was okay. In their minds, they were set on him being unconscious. He freaked them out with his startling amusement and enthusiasm. Ron spoke first, after catching his breath. "Dog, Dave, you're nuts. Don't do that to us again." Dave gave him a look and said, "Oh, yeah, like I could do that again." Jeremy remarked, "You should have been knocked out, you freak." David laughed as he made the comment, "Wow, everything is on now, and there's no one here but us. We can do everything for free and do whatever we want. Let's go." The other two lit up and let out a "Woohoo! Yes!" as they followed their fearless leader. The next